With the first pick, he's the number one pick in the draft.
Major League Baseball's amateur draft is about 1 month away, so now is the time. It's Perfect Games Mock Draft 2023. And by the way, you can follow along by visiting perfectgame.org. You can go player by player, track by track. Hi there, folks. My name is Darren Sutton. We love this time of year. The effort of these athletes has reached its pinnacle. And joining us to help us understand in this mock draft what all these athletes have done to move to the top of the mountain, national cross-checker, Brian Sakowski. You love this time, don't you?
Absolutely, Sut. It's one of my favorite times of the year, just the culmination of everything that's going on as far as like a year's worth of work, a year's worth of scouting, all that coming together in a way for us to kind of give our final ideas on guys, and then the draft itself happens, and it's controlled chaos, and I love every part of it. This time of year is awesome every single year.
Yeah, and you start right over on the class of 24. The theme of the class of 2023 in your mind is?
There's a couple, I would say, Darren. I think the more macro answer might be prep bats. Not necessarily prep outfielders, it's not necessarily prep infielders, just prep hitters. I think there's a strong top tier. I think there's good depth. I think it can go into day two in terms of the depth. Obviously, some of those guys are not going to sign and they'll head to college, and that's good for college baseball, but really like that part of the draft, and I like that part of the draft last year as well. And the more micro example is, I think, the upper crust, the top 5, top 6 players, depending on your perspective on what the top tier is. I think that's really, really good. And anytime you can have a really good top part of the class, you're setting yourself up to have a good draft. So that's where I'm at with it.
So for me, a brief, if you don't mind, theme, because you think of COVID, and someday we won't talk about this as much, but it's very current. The seniors that you guys think a lot of were freshmen when COVID hit. They lost their year. They couldn't play for that varsity team. Maybe they made that team as a freshman in high school. Those that are 3 years into college, they lost their senior year of high school. Maybe they couldn't climb the rankings. Maybe they couldn't get that one last look in front of guys like you representing major league teams as well. And yet they went to college and they busted their tails. Guys that were in the 200s and 300s in the rankings have moved their way into consideration anyway as first round picks. I love that part of it. I love the fact that you think it's deep. So with that in mind, please represent the Pittsburgh Pirates and make that number 1 pick.
This is actually a more interesting pick right now than it was even a month ago, I think. We're going with Dylan Crews. We're going chalk. We're taking our first overall player off the board, first overall. But with that being said, there's some potential for creativity here. We don't know yet. We probably won't know until the day of the draft, but there's a chance that this is Max Clark. There's a chance it could be someone else. There's a chance that Pittsburgh wants to cut a little bit of a deal and then spread that money down the bonus pool a little bit. I would imagine that Max Clark would be the leading candidate if they were to go that way, but we're going to stick with Crews for now. He's been the number 1 player in this draft class since he pulled his name out of the 2020 draft. And Sut, you talked about COVID guys and the impacts that had. This is a good story of that, a good example of that. Crews was, a top 40-ish talent in that draft class heading into the spring right when COVID hit. Decided that wasn't going to be it for him, wanted the no-doubt first-round money or whatever it was, and decided to pull his name out of the draft and go to LSU. And pretty much since that moment, we've been waiting for, all right, 2023 draft, Dylan Crews is going to go first overall. Because that's how good he's been. Right away, too, at LSU, right away in the SEC. It's impactful all the way across the board. He's an unbelievable offensive performer. He walks way more than he strikes out. He knows the zone. He doesn't chase that much. There's a ton of power there. He's a good athlete. The approach, like we talked about, is outstanding, as is the bat-to-ball skills. He'll play center field, at least at first. Just so many superlatives we could talk about with Crews. But, I mean, all you got to do is look at his numbers. And I know that's a simplification of it, but the dude is performing like no one ever has in the SEC, in the era of normal bats, I should say anyways. But unbelievable performer. We're going with the top guy at 1.
Yeah, the numbers are crazy. Heading into regional play, a 567 on base, 710 slug. You talked about those walks, 58 of them, and just 38 strikeouts. Remember him back in Jupiter 2019. You remember when he played for the Scorpions, folks out there, had a 400 on base. What I love about him, though, is kind of the off-the-field stuff. Families helping families. A charity that provides 4 seats right there at an LSU game that might not be able to afford to have the seats or a special needs child to go to the game with their family. Dylan Crews made that happen. That's a great, great number 1 overall pick for all the right reasons, including what he'll help the Pittsburgh Pirates with right there on the banks of the Allegheny River. All right, the number 2 pick belongs to the Nats. Go representing, please.
We're going to stay in Baton Rouge here. We're going to take Paul Skeens for the Nats at number 2 overall. He's number 3 on our board, depending on whose board you look at. He's right there. It's the best college pitching prospect to come out since Garrett Cole, maybe Steven Strasburg before that. But either way, it's a dude who's got tons of ability, tons of talent, and we've seen that. This was a transfer. He was at Air Force. Obviously, his future's on the mound, but an interesting backstory nonetheless. Either way, it's unbelievable fastball velocity. It's 98 to 101 deep into starts. Yep, there's a good curveball in there too. He throws a ton of strikes. Sud, I know you have the specific number. He struck out nearly half of everyone he's faced this year, which is pretty good the last time I checked. So it's just, we're talking about more so how much do you value the risk of taking a pitcher this high, because pitchers do get hurt and we don't know. It's impossible to project. But so there's an element of risk in that sense, but when you're the best guy since Cole, you're probably not going to fall very far. So we're going to go Skeens here at 2.
Yeah, Zach, that K rate, 46.1%, number 1 in the nation. That's about 300 Division I schools in their pitching staffs, number 1 in the country. Half of them he strikes out. I love the fact that he too, like his teammate gives back, Folds of Honor, who helps to uplift the widows or the children of those that have lost their lives serving our country, paying tuition, making sure they can go. On his own, he's raised $5,000. This is a college kid. There's not a lot of money. He's raised $5,000 himself. That'll change. But when it changes, he's going to keep giving back, and that's a good thing. And by the way, in the class of 2020, he was ranked 400th. 400th. So all you players out there, you're going to college, don't give up hope. He was a number 35th ranked catcher in the country as ranked by Perfect Game. I love what he has done. Part of that COVID growth, using college to do so. So a couple of LSU guys now represent, if you don't mind. Walk more than he struck out, 17 home runs to end the regular season. On base 521, 823 slug played when he was playing travel ball for that Canes national team, Wyatt Langford. Here's another one though that took college and made good. He was ranked 144th in the 20 class. He went to college, he developed and earned more and more playing time, has done incredible things. A one-time All-State linebacker his freshman year in high school at a smaller level. That means he's kind of a skillsy and strong athlete. Wyatt Langford goes to the Tigers. That means the Texas Rangers, who, by the way, are full of wealth and spending and having fun and playing really well, they still get a very high pick. What are they going to pick in your mind?
Yeah, they have a chance to do something cool here. You can look at this from the perspective of their window has now opened based on the free agent signings. So maybe they should shoot to take a player who's closer to the majors and can maybe impact that window with the current core. But the way this board has fell with the top 3 picks all being college guys, I think that here, and we're going to go with Walker Jenkins, the outfielder from North Carolina, the high school outfielder from North Carolina. I think that it's hard to pass up on the top preps, even if those guys are a little bit further away than some of the college guys that we maybe talk about. But Jenkins, he and Max Clark have gone back and forth as far as who the best player in the country is. We have it Jenkins currently. A really good athlete. He's huge. He hits left-handed. It's a gorgeous swing. It's 70 bat speed with 70 power potential. with good bat-to-ball skills, with a good approach, with good zone awareness, and the athleticism really shines in the outfield. Fully healthy now. He'd been dinged up a little bit last summer, but he looks great and is trending towards the top 5 pick, and I think the Rangers would do that if the board falls this way.
The prep bats are coming alive. We're starting to see some of those prep bats who, if you're listening to Brian earlier, they may get less money, be higher. We'll see how it plays. Walker Jenkins, by the way, one of our favorites, especially in the storytelling world, from south of Brunswick High School in North Carolina, swims at the state level on the swim team and did it again this year, which I find incredible. Strong family values. You guys started seeing him on the scouting side back in 2014 when young Walker Jenkins was 5'1", and 76 pounds, chasing his dreams. I love how these athletes evolve. South Charlotte Panthers, his travel team, he walked a bunch this year, and that's kind of a theme, I think, for elite bats. 32 walks, the on-base percentage was high. Character plays with Walker Jenkins, man. I selfishly like that pick a lot because I like Walker Jenkins. All right, so Jenkins goes. Is it another prep bat is the question. When you rep another team that's kind of on the uptick in the big league level, the Minnesota Twins.
And the Twins, obviously, big beneficiaries of the new draft lottery. I don't remember exactly where their record said they should have picked, like maybe 14th or something like that. But to bounce all the way up to 5 while having a solid big league club, obviously a place where they can do some damage. We have them picking Max Clark here, the center fielder from Franklin High School in Indiana. Just talked about him. We mentioned him as a potential 1-1 guy. Have him going here at 5. It's massive upside. He's a great player. I went down to Indianapolis and saw him play this year against a really good Mooresville High School team, and all he did was hit 4 balls on the barrel and walk and steal bases, including a couple home runs. And what else can you do? But yeah, everyone knows who Max Clark is. Max Clark's really, really good at baseball. He's also he's 5-tool guy. It's a good hit tool. It's a good swing. He's changed his swing a little bit over the past year to kind of get more loft in, to kind of get more to the pull side, and it's shown up. He's back spinning balls way out to the pull side. He's hammering balls out on a line to center. And he's doing it while playing plus defense in center, running plus times down the line. He has a cannon of a left arm. When he pitches, he's into the mid-90s if he wants to, but it's just the whole package, a complete player, a really, really good competitor, and his numbers in the spring, Sud, unbelievable at last check. I believe the season's over now, but something like a 2,200 OPS or something ridiculous. But yeah, Max Clark here, 5th overall.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The kids all say 1 dot when they're talking about OPS. If you're 1,000, he's 2 dot, as you mentioned, over 2,000 with his OPS this year. He was incredible. He had an 808 on base, a 12-15 slug, 6 home runs, 52 walks. 52 walks. The thing I love about Max Clark is he's complex. He's a complex human being. He's a passionate individual. He has the cross with the eye black because he's very confident and strong in his faith. He's very strong in the social media world. That has not led him astray. As a matter of fact, he's a brand. He's not just a prospect, he's a brand. So for me, for the Vanderbilt commit, in my world, and I think for a lot of fans, especially younger fans, you can ask a 14-year-old and you have a better chance that they know Max Clark than a member of, let's say, the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's who he is. Young athletes are watching him very closely. He represents the modern prospect, and you guys helped to project and put him in that space. Fun pick with Max Clark. All right, so Clark goes to the Twins. The Oakland Athletics, they're having a tough year, as we all know. They may be Las Vegas sooner or later. You never can tell. But the Oakland A's pick next, and you say what?
Yeah, I think Oakland's in an interesting spot because I think the top 5 players in the country are how they went in the order that we've described so far. It's probably unlikely that happens on draft night. There's probably going to be a surprise mixed in. And Oakland at 6, they can wait and see if one of those guys fall. We'll see what happens, but we have them with Kyle Teal, the catcher from Virginia. He's a guy that's really forcing his way into that upper tier conversation. I think he's a guy who might be in play in the top 5, depending on how it shakes out, depending on what certain teams want. But going with Teal here for the Athletics, a guy who controls the zone at an elite level. He's a left-handed hitter. He's a really advanced athlete for the catcher position, which seems to be kind of where we're headed as far as the catcher position at the big league level. You have to be laterally agile enough to block 96-mile-an-hour splitters now. You know, you have to be able to move and get to 104-mile-an-hour fastballs that are thrown with 20 inches of horizontal movement out of the zone. You have to be springy and twitchy and athletic to catch at the big league level now, and he's that. He's a little bit undersized as you look at those things, but really good left-handed swing, sprays the field, has good power to the pull side. going to get on base a ton, and really a good defensive catcher as well.
He had a 479 on base this year. His dad played professionally in the Dodgers organization for about a half decade, so there's a little bit of blood of learning it. The ACC Player of the Year a couple of years back in New Jersey, the Gatorade Player of the Year when things were shortened and COVID came about. And by the way, speaking of COVID, I keep going back to this. This is a player that took his ranking number 142 and went from 142 amongst high school players to number 6 in your mind amongst all players that are eligible to be drafted. So kudos to the catcher, Kyle Teel. Haynes National, when he played his travel ball, loved that story. I'm a Dodgers and a Reds house. I may beg you to pick for the Dodgers near the end because they don't get a first-round pick. But let's focus on, may I say it? Sorry, folks, my Cincinnati Reds. As before we get to break, let's not rush through this. Who do you want the Reds to pick? Please represent one of my teams.
Yeah, we have them going with Chase Dollander here from Tennessee, the right-hander. Dollander entered the season as kind of the top dog amongst the pitching crop. We saw him as the top, and then Paul Skeens kind of took care of that for everyone. But Dollander's still viewed as a top 10 prospect. A little up and down this year, not quite as dominant as he was as a sophomore last year, his first year at Tennessee, but still a ton of things to like. He's an athlete. It's a good delivery. The fastball plays really, really well. He's kind of held his velocity, even in spite of some rougher outings, some uncharacteristic outings. It's a full mix. We like the command. You like the delivery. You like the athleticism, how it all fits together and how it all projects. There's been a little bit of concern this year with the vertical arm angle metric. For him, it's lower than it was last year. That sometimes can lead to some things just in terms of how the stuff plays and comes out of his hand. But the idea is in pro dev, if you can kind of get it back to exactly what it was as a sophomore, then that stuff's going to take that jump again. But either way, we're not talking about a guy who lost his stuff. He still has a whole bunch of pluses and 70s on the card. It's just there's still some room a little bit for some tweaking, I think, once he gets into professional baseball. But here at 7, you're taking the second pitcher of the draft, probably the second best pitcher of the draft, depending on your perspective. And I have to imagine the Reds fans would be excited about that.
I'm excited. Georgia Southern is where he started. He's out of Evans, Georgia. Then made the bold transfer to Tennessee. I love the courage to do that. And by the way, talk about evolving. He was ranked 227 amongst right-handed pitchers back in 2020. So he again has used college to develop. He's 21 years old, turned 21 this past fall. And in his career in college, 201 2/3 innings, 279 strikeouts, and his K rate, 5th in the NCAA. We're talking about Skeens, that crazy number. But his K rate is 5th in the NCAA. So Dollander. So we've got some great college players that have come off the board, certainly, and just 2 elite high school players. So when we come back, the Royals get set to go to work. It's our mock draft. We're about 1 month away from the MLB Amateur Draft. Brian takes us down that road when we come back.
With the first pick, he's the number 1 pick in the draft.
Mock Draft 2023, Brian and Darren back with you. We've had 5 college players come off the board, a couple of elite high school bats. Brian, you're speaking on behalf of what is such a unique and strong scouting community. The Perfect Game scouting staff going, border to border, going globally, really, as we have evolved as a company. But I've got to ask you, as you make these picks, is this exactly how you would select these players? I'm curious how that plays in with your mind.
No, this is when we do mock drafts, especially when we're this close to the draft, like this is a month out, not 6 months out, for example. This is what I'm hearing. This is like trying to line it up how I think it's going to go, trying to get into the heads of Major League Baseball scouting directors and GMs and try and project what they're going to do. This is predominantly feedback based. It's predominantly, I call it dope based. You get the info synonymous with the word dope. Like that's what we're looking for. That's what I'm doing with this is trying to uncover the mysteries. And this is not going to be correct. It never is. I think the most we've ever had correct, even on a day of mock draft, is like 8 picks. But either way, it's more so this makes sense and matches with what I'm hearing as opposed to this is what I would do. When you look at the draft board, when you look at how we line players up, that's like the order of how I'd want it. And not me specifically, but like Vinny Servino, obviously involved in a big way, Jared Goodwin, the rest of the Perfect Game scouting department. That's more of a representative sample of what we think the class looks like or how we'd line it up.
All right, let's put you back to work and represent the Kansas City Royals at 8. They're fun because it was yesterday that Nick Pratto and Bobby Witt were being selected out of high school. Now they're playing key roles in the major leagues for the Royals. So please represent the Royals.
Yeah, I'm actually going to take the guy that could be standing next to Bobby Witt on the left side of the infield, and Jacob Gonzalez from Ole Miss. He plays shortstop there. I think he's got a chance to play short up the chain in pro baseball, but maybe second base, maybe third base, and obviously Bobby Witt entrenched there. But left-handed bat, SEC performer, guy who gets on base a ton. He hits the ball hard. There's power there from the left side to go with potentially even more power projection. I think he could maybe get the ball in the air even a little bit more than he already does, which could lead to some 20, 25, 30 home run seasons is the hope. Along with some defensive value on the left side of the infield, I think that this is a guy who is in play anywhere from 5 down to 10, somewhere in that range. Has kind of consistently performed and has been on some really good teams. Obviously won a national championship last year, but I think this is a good spot for him here at 8 with the Royals.
It's a fun legacy because he's a 2016 Select Festival alum. Did not make that All-American roster. As a matter of fact, Gonzalez graduated Glendora High School in the rankings 132nd. So here's another one that's taken college baseball, in this case the Ole Miss program, and used it to develop. That's been his developmental pool. All right, so the Royals, you have that pick. Now the Rockies step into the room, and Brian, please represent them.
I'm going to go with Braden Taylor here.
I'm guessing, where he opened a lot of eyes. So Braden Taylor goes to the Rockies, and now at 10, the Marlins step to the podium. Brian?
We'll stick with the theme of college infielders here. We're going to go with Jacob Wilson from Grand Canyon, the shortstop there. A different profile than the two we've mentioned in the last couple picks. It's not power over anything else like it is with those guys. This is more approach, zone awareness, zone control. Dude never strikes out. Like, just doesn't strike out. It's an unbelievable eye at the plate, an unbelievable sort of uncanny ability to get bat on ball. I think that his approach has gotten better over the years. I think there was a stretch where he was so good at making contact that he would make contact on pitches he didn't need to be swinging at, even though he could make contact on them. So as he's kind of gotten better in his approach and understood his swing decisions a little bit better, we've seen a little bit more impact as a result of that. There's some potential for power there. He's a solid infield defender. We'll see if he's going to play short long term. He's not super sudden laterally or anything like that, but the fundamentals are very, very strong, as you might imagine, given the bloodlines there of the big league infielder father. And we'll see where he goes, but it's a different profile. The power is more projection than now, but should be a top 10, top 15 pick, something like that.
Yeah, his dad, Jack, had 1,300 hits in the big leagues. Loved watching him play when I was broadcasting. Brian, to your point, the numbers, they're kind of silly. I want to back you up. 217 plate appearances, 5 strikeouts, folks. 217, 5. And by the way, as you said, a little bit of chasing, only 19 walks. So he brought a bat to home plate, and he brought the bat to use it. That's the bottom line, how he has been this year. He's from Thousand Oaks, California, and played his travel ball, GBG, Garcia Parra Baseball Group. And that's a fun pick. I like Grand Canyon. I love the folks over there. Jacob Wilson goes in that spot. And now the Angels, who have earned their way right here to pick behind the Marlins. The Angels, please represent them.
So they've been so arms heavy in recent years. I could see that continuing. Rhett Lauder's on the board here still, for example. That's a guy that could be for them. But I don't know if they're going to stick with that many arms back to back years or whoever. So I'm going with Enrique Bradfield here from Vanderbilt, the center fielder. One of the most exciting players in college baseball. A true 80 runner, an elite runner who is also an elite defender in center field. And there's a lot of talk about, well, he doesn't have a ton of power. Like, where's the offensive impact going to come from? The exit velocity data is not elite or anything like that. But for me, if he just hits a little bit, he's an everyday player in the major leagues because of how his speed is impactful and because of how his defense is impactful. And I think he'll hit more than a little bit. It might not be a 20 homer guy, but this is a dude who's going to make a lot of contact. He's going to get a lot of base hits. He's going to steal a lot of bases. And he's so fast that you can add an extra base to whatever a normal person would get anytime he hits the ball in the gap. So I don't think that the bat is without impact or anything like that. And I think we're looking at an above average everyday major leaguer in center field here.
We had a chance to speak with his mom, Jenny, on our Mother's Day special. What a classy family he hails from. His dad, Enrique, 130 career stolen bases heading into regionals. Bradfield just took so many home runs away. I mean, it's one thing to do it once, and it's literally, folks, like taking home runs away. It's not hyperbole when we say that. It felt like a handful of times every single year at Vanderbilt. I love it for the Angels, certainly. That's a heck of a get. So love Enrique Bradfield. There's so much there. That's the complete package. Now, it feels like the Diamondbacks are the complete package of young players. Players that we've seen come through the PG world that are racing to the big leagues. See Carroll, see Thomas, doing great things defensively. So please represent the team in the great state of Arizona, where the studio hails from as well, the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, I think giving them a ready-made number 2 to number 3 starter is a pretty good shot as far as what they'd like to do. But Rhett Lauder from Wake Forest, the right-hander here, a consummate performer. He's been really good throughout his college career, has been excellent this year. As we know with Wake Forest, they are a developmental factory. They have the pitching lab there. They are as progressive and advanced in terms of the data and in terms of the application of said data as anybody in the country at the college level. So you're getting a guy who understands himself as a pitcher more than most in that sense. But Lauder's, it's a two-seam guy. He's into the mid-90s with the fastball. He commands it at a really high level. Full mix of pitches. He can throw multiple pitches in multiple counts for strikes and move things around. And I don't think he'll take all that long in the minor leagues. And I think that the upside is pretty substantial. It is, like I said, a number 2, number 3 type of starter. That
1.58 ERA, number 2 in the nation, wrapping up the regular season. He did do a lot of running around at perfect game events. As a matter of fact, in Jupiter in 2019, he threw 7 1/3 and he struck out 12, and he did that throwing 88, 89 miles an hour. So there was some pitching going on. Rhett Lauder, a spectacular pick there for the Diamondbacks. Excited about the young man out of New London, North Carolina. Wrigley's listening. The Chicago Cubs are on the board. They pick just beyond those Arizona Diamondbacks, and please rep them.
I'm going to go with one of my favorite players in the class here, Arjun Nimmala, the shortstop from Florida High School. The Strawberry Crest, I think, is the name of the high school. Either way, Nimmala, I've talked about him with you on this show multiple times in the last year or so. It is as tension-free a swing and power creation as you will see from someone who's 170 pounds. It's something I've never seen before. And we can talk to any number of guys with longer PG track records than I do, and they all say similar things. He has incredible raw power for a guy who is still just kind of starting to fill out. He's just kind of starting to mature. And he's a good athlete. He had a good spring. It's tough to play in Florida. It's tough to perform enough in Florida for the scouts to keep liking you if they liked you last summer. That's just a reality because they play every day. So I like him here. I think this would be a pick that the Cubs would do if he were still available at 13. But this one, kind of to touch on what we talked about not all that long ago, was a me pick. I think I wanted the Cubs to take Arjun, and I think that he's as high an upside player as there is outside of maybe the top 5, and I believe that since last year too.
Yeah, he's a favorite of all of ours, and I understand why you would make it out of Valrico, Florida, me pick, Florida State commit. Number 3 player overall amongst high schoolers in the 2023 class, and he's 17 years old. I mean, folks need to understand he's not 18 yet. Very, very, very proud of his Indian heritage and that uniqueness of bringing that into professional baseball. Balu Niraja, his parents' dad, had a huge cricket background, but is passionate about baseball. There's so much there at 13 for Arjun Nimmala. Wonderful pick for the Cubs. And another very traditional ballpark and franchise, the Boston Red Sox, before we go to break, at number 14.
This is going to go back to the college well here with Matt Shaw, the infielder from Maryland. Guy who's he was kind of up and down this season. Just there was kind of one stretch of, well, is this guy really a first rounder? And then it immediately came back up. Guy raked on the Cape last year. He raked through the Big Ten this year. He hit well even in out-of-conference games. There'll be an opportunity, obviously, for us to see him against some more out-of-conference arms as Maryland is well into the tournament. But either way, he's not a shortstop, probably a second baseman, maybe a chance to play some third too in that versatility way. But a right-handed hitter with a ton of power who makes a lot of contact and sprays the ball around and has performed. Can hit breaking balls, waits is the wrong word, but is patient in his approach, doesn't chase. A lot of things to like there as a performer. I know the lack of not being a true shortstop kind of may ding the value there, but you're drafting a bat who could probably get to the show pretty quickly.
He's 21 and his body's 21, so understand what I'm saying. He has the mind and the prep of someone who's 45. He has a very serious girlfriend in his life. He's very regimented. Sounds like a 3 or 4 year major leaguer who's understanding how he goes along. Enjoyed conversations with the young man out of Worcester Academy in Mass. 5 for 5 against South Florida, his second game of the year. Had 5 hits. That's incredibly impossible to do. And he's another one. Ranked 169 among shortstops in the class of 2020. Matt Shaw has taken college, in this case Maryland, to truly evolve. A mixed bag in this second segment. Royals, Rockies, the D-backs, I love their pick. When we come back, the White Sox step up to the podium. They're taking a peek ahead at the 2023 MLB Amateur Draft. This is PG's Mock Draft. Brian and I back in a moment.
With the first pick, he's the number 1 pick in the draft.
Making our way now into the second half of the first round. Brian, just 3 high school players, 11 college players as we get to pick number 15, the Chicago White Sox at 15. You're representing the great organization, and you say?
Yeah, I think we're gonna start to pick some more high schoolers here. I know it's been a college-heavy first half, but that's kind of generally how it goes nowadays anyways. Everyone likes the safety of the college guys or the perceived safety of the college guys. Anyways, White Sox at 15, we're going with Aiden Miller. The left side of the infielder from Florida. He could be a shortstop. I think he's probably more of a third baseman. Doesn't matter. Miller came into the season right in this range. Maybe top 20, maybe even top 10, depending on who you looked at. I think he broke his hand. He had an injury in the middle of the season, cost him a bunch of time. He did come back healthy from it. His high school season is now over, and in attending private workouts, he's been going off. The data has been outstanding. The testing has been really, really good. The exit data, how much power he's able to create and how much power we think he's going to have long term. So the profile is not a super complex one, and I don't mean that in any sort of negative way. This is a dude who's going to hit for power and play on the left side of the infield. He hits right-handed, maybe a third baseman, but either way, that's a slam dunk middle of the first rounder, and I think that would make sense for the White Sox here at 15.
Yeah, he's bounced back from that hamate bone injury. Aiden Miller, his dad Jason, the top-tier Ruse baseball group in the academy, where the teaching facility where he's done so much developing. His brother Jackson, albeit battling through some illnesses and injuries, a very highly thought-of catcher in the Cincinnati Reds organization, number 6 overall in the rankings, and just so many things he's done well. We talked earlier about Namala. He won Jupiter, the World Wood Bat Association World Championship a couple of years ago. Aiden Miller's team won it last year. A couple of Jupiter champions also going high in the draft. White Sox go. Giants, San Francisco, right behind at number 16.
It's kind of like a not super well-kept secret that the Giants like Walker Martin. That's not a dope that I have exclusively. I think a lot of people have that, but we're going to go with Walker Martin here. I think this is probably where his run would start, his ceiling in the draft. A Colorado guy, he's got 20 bombs this spring, and he's not done playing yet as a high school player. He's older for the class, which is going to kill him in some of the more age-appropriate models or age-specific models, but in terms of the performance, in terms of the tools, in terms of the athleticism, he's kind of an off-the-charts athletic tester. That all makes sense as far as a first-round guy. And obviously with the performance this spring, left-handed power, athleticism, left side of the infield somewhere, it all adds together to be a first-rounder. So I'm going to go with him here for the Giants.
Yeah, crazy numbers. Eaton High School in Colorado, back-to-back 3A championships coming into this year with Tony Hernandez as their head coach. Martin, a fun study, really, with all he has done. Mom played college basketball. The family is strong athletically, Daryl and Sarah. And so for him, as his sister goes off, by the way, too, and plays college volleyball, Walker Martin, along with Sis, just an interesting family, an interesting athlete. And at this point, Colorado representing. And so the Giants with Walker Martin. At 17, the Orioles. They walk into the room, they grab the microphone, and what do they say?
I think the Orioles are one of the teams, and I think the Cardinals are one of the teams too later down the board, who are just kind of a, all right, who falls to us mentality. Like, who do we have graded really high that someone in front of us is going to mess up by not taking, and that's the guy we take. And I think that Mike Elias does a great job with that, and they identify players they know are going to hit, and they worry about the rest of it later. And Tommy Troy from Stanford is one of those guys. He's not a shortstop, and that's kind of one thing that might hurt him with other clubs, but kind of an identification of a guy who can really hit. The exit velocity data has been off the charts this spring, especially for a player who's not super big. He's not super physical. I wouldn't call him undersized, but this is not a physical giant by any stretch. And he's hitting the ball as hard as dudes with freak strength. And so it's talking about catching lightning in a bottle there of a super offensive, big performer, power, hit tool approach guy who maybe has to play second base, maybe he's got to play third base. It's not going to be shortstop. We'll worry about the defense later. This makes a lot of sense for the Orioles if he were to get here.
You feel like the defense will lock in. I pump my fist. He's one of my favorites, covering the Pac-12 network out of Stanford. The athleticism will hopefully mold into defense. I'll remember 2019 at National Chase Field. It felt like he was like this far above the ground, just floating, doing drills. And watching them, seeing him go on to do things at Stanford. His father, a captain in a police department up in San Jose, is recently retired. His mom, a marathoner, a really unique and a rich family, certainly in that area. Turned 21 on January 17th, and mixed martial arts black belt, which probably doesn't surprise you with the type of athleticism. One of my favorite in the draft as far as human beings, Tommy Troy. 18, the Milwaukee Brewers. Who do they select?
I put Colton Ledbetter here from Mississippi State. I don't have any specific information that says that the Brewers are on Ledbetter. This just made sense to me in this spot. So to give a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, this one was more of just that fits. Ledbetter is a transfer into Mississippi State this year. This was his first year in the SEC. He performed really well. We expected him to. He knows the zone really well. He doesn't swing at balls all that often. He doesn't expand. You could maybe make the argument that he could swing at more strikes. But either way, it's a guy who knows the zone, who knows his approach, is comfortable in it. The batted ball data is very, very strong. He performed in a big way this year. Like the counting numbers are good, but the exit velocity data would tell you that he has more power than maybe he's even shown. So I think getting the ball in the air a little bit more, and he's got a chance to play center. I think he's more of a left fielder for me personally, but I saw him play center field this year at Kentucky. He made some plays in the gaps. He's a solid runner down the line. I think there's a chance there for him. But he fits right here at 18 for the Brewers.
Another athlete that challenges himself, a smaller program at Samford in Birmingham. He's from Birmingham, from the Hoover area, Spain Park High School. Makes that bold transfer. You talked about those counting stats, 17 stolen bases, 12 home runs, slugged nearly 600. Kudos to him. I mean, Colton Ledbetter really turning this year out of Samford into Mississippi State into a wonderful jump. Whoever the Rays pick, you wonder why you didn't pick them, no matter who it is, literally, because they seem to do everything right. So all you organizations, whoever Brian says here, even if you're picking 1-1, you're going to be concerned why you didn't pick this player. Who did the Rays select in your mind?
And you could make the argument that this guy has the physical abilities and talents of a potential 1-1 guy, but for the fact that he's a high school pitcher, we're going to go with Noble Meyer here for the Rays. I think he's in play way higher than this. I think he's in play from number 10 down, maybe even. It's just tough to peg the Prep arms just because everyone's so scared of them, and then the teams that aren't scared of them are the teams you're surprised that aren't scared of them. It's a little weird. But anyways, going with Noble Meyer here at Jesuit High School in Oregon, right-handed pitcher. As good at pitch traits as we've seen from the Prep class in a while. He's huge and he moves well and he's athletic and he fills up the zone. He's had a couple up and down starts where maybe the command eluded him a little bit. That happens to 99.9% of high school pitchers, so I'm not all that concerned about it. But it's elite arm speed. He's up near triple digits with the fastball and sits in the mid-90s. It's a 70 grade slider with probably a 60 grade curveball on top of it. The spin metrics are all off the charts. He projects in a huge way. All kinds of talent, all kinds of upside for Noble Meyer.
Waz, I don't think he's getting you at Oregon, unfortunately. Jesuit High School, Portland. I love his head coach, Colin Griffin, up there in the Portland area. And had a great outing at NHSI. I know you guys talked about it quite a bit, threw very hard. A couple of things that I find interesting. On a biographical survey a couple of years back, Noble, when I asked for the pronunciation, opted to help me pronunciate his first name. And if I were to pronunciate it, like I'm mispronouncing the word right now, I would say Noble. Noble Meyer. Well, I don't know that the word noble needs a pronunciation, but just in case, N-O-B-U-L-L, Noble. And in other words, to me, what I found fun about that, there is no bull with this kid. He loves his simple mechanics. He loves watching DeGrom work because he does everything quietly, no bull. And I love this young man. And pronouncing his name, I definitely was comfortable with. But getting to know Erica, Mike, his family, and his head coach in high school, this is a wonderful pick. Again, all the rest of baseball, you messed up. The Rays took Noble Meyer. Okay, so the Rays take Meyer. Toronto is at 20.
I think Toronto could go in a bunch of different ways here. There's some prep arms still on the board that are interesting. There's college bats on the board that are still interesting. But a guy that is rising in a big way and has done so all spring, almost really dating back to last summer, is Colin Houck, Parkview High School shortstop. We're going to go with him here for Toronto at number 20. Probably a third baseman long term, but it's huge power from the right side of the plate. He's a good athlete. Performed out of his mind this spring. Georgia scouts go nuts about him whenever you ask about him. So I think that how, like I said with Meyer, the pick before, his ceiling is going to start higher than this. There's a pretty good chance he goes higher than this. But it made sense to me on the board right now for what we're doing. Toronto at 20. Colin Houck, get another impactful right-handed hitting left side of the infielder in the system. And maybe that's the dude who can play next to Bichette long term or something like that. But makes sense to me here at 20.
Hey. He picked the right time. You guys are all at the high school showdown. He homered twice at that event. Houck probably doesn't make it to Mississippi State. Big arm, certainly, has thrown in the 90s as a pitcher in front of you guys. About a 6'6", 60, and went off at Jupiter. So high school showdown, Jupiter went off at both out of Parkview High School. Love that program. Colin Houck picking the right time to play well. He goes to Toronto. The Cardinals are an intriguing team, certainly, as we watch like Matthew Liberatore try to make his way back into the rotation. We see Nolan Gorman, a darling amongst prospects, a couple of years back, a PG All-American. And at 21, who did the St. Louis Cardinals pick?
We're going to go with Nolan Schanuel here, the left-handed hitting first baseman for Florida Atlantic, maybe an outfielder also. But either way, we want to talk about stats. We can talk about stats with Nolan Schanuel. And actually, if you have him in front of you, I'm going to let you tell the folks before I even break down what he is as a player.
Yeah. I'll just throw a few at you. This is great. It's his regular season. This is obviously what he did in the body of work in his regular season. 71 walks, 14 strikeouts in a full season. His walk rate is 25%, number 2 in the country. Weighted runs created plus, all you geeks like me, an advanced metric, 219, number 1 in the NCAA amongst all 300 schools, all players on the roster, number 1. 612 on base percentage, number 1 in the NCAA amongst all players. You take the mic back over, please.
If my understanding of weighted runs created plus, that means he's 119% better than the average player.
Yeah, the average player is 100. You're exactly right. The average player is 100. 100, that's right.
That's nuts. But yeah, it is what the stats say it is. He's got huge left-handed power. He knows the zone. He doesn't swing and miss. I've had some people that I trust in a big way, higher up in scouting departments, tell me this is the best amateur hitter on the planet. And that's inclusive of, we talked about Dylan Cruz, we talked about Wyatt Langford, et cetera, et cetera. But the drawback is he's probably a first baseman, maybe a DH, maybe he can play right field a little while. There's not going to be a ton of defensive value here, but you're getting such an impactful bat, and from the left side of the plate, and with the on-base stuff that you want to see. This isn't just power. And I think that there's a pretty good chance he goes higher than this too, but if I would have to imagine if he's there at 21, this is going to be the pick for St. Louis.
The Conference USA Player of the Year, deservedly so. Who's not romantic about baseball? I mean, romance through and through. He turned 21 years old on Valentine's Day. Oh. That is how romantic we are about those numbers. I love Schanuel. Had a chance to have him on our Amateur Hour podcast. One of my favorites. We now shift gears, and we'll talk about this team 3 times as they've got some comp picks. The draft is in Seattle. They'll have all sorts of fun. This is a big one for you. I thought the Rays was a big pick because everyone else is now jealous. But the Mariners are at home. They celebrate the draft. You represent the M's at number 22.
So generally speaking, with the top tier prep arms, you're unlikely to get them in the 20s. You're like, it's usually you have to go before that in order to have enough money to pay them, or it's with someone's second pick where they're overpaying them, and that's in the 40s or the 50s or whatever. But when you have 3 picks from 22 to 30, you have a ton of money and can do whatever you want. So I'm going to give Seattle the best prep lefty in the country, and that's Thomas White from Massachusetts. I don't think that he'll be picked in the 20s by anybody other than Seattle because of the reasons I laid out. Like this, he's going to cost money because he's really, really good, and they have the money, so it makes sense. But gorgeous delivery, good body. He's been outstanding this spring, sans one start, I believe. But anybody who's gone in and seen him, and Jeremy Brown went and saw him too, it's into the mid-90s with the fastball, and he's holding it. The changeup is plus. That's brand new. We've never really even seen him throw a changeup until this spring, and it's plus now. It's a 60-grade pitch. The sliders come on in a big way. The metrics all check out. It's a good body. He's projectable. He throws strikes. Kind of the whole package in terms of a projection prep lefty, and this will be great for Seattle in front of the hometown crowd to make him their first pick.
Yeah, and Thomas White is fun because the mind is so strong. I love this pick. Phillips Academy in Andover, Mass., which represents 47 countries and 46 states, where he's passionate about mathematics and engineering and physics. And a man who is, he's available at that pick, it's thrilling because you get that, you will be costly, but at number 4 overall in the nation, number 1 lefty, he should be costly. He's earned the right with what he's accomplished. All right, the Cleveland Guardians now, the number 23. Before we take a quick break, who are the Guardians selecting?
The Guardians were interesting for me. Usually you can kind of get a range with them, like kind of get an idea of who their group is going to be because of we know things that they value. They value age in high school guys. They value contact ability. We understand that. So I think there's a bunch of guys who were picked right ahead of them that might be on Cleveland's board. Shanuel comes to mind in that sense. Ledbetter, Tommy Troy, those guys I think will all be on Cleveland's board. But with those guys gone, I went and stayed home, as close to home as you can, and went with Colt Emerson. He's from a couple hours outside of Cleveland, but not too far. Still an Ohio guy. Left-handed hitting shortstop who has kind of hit at every stop. I first saw that kid when he was 14, and he raked. I think he went 3 for 4 with singles in every direction when I saw him on the barrel. It's a really good swing. He's added some power to his game. He had a good spring this year. Hit for some power, hit for some more explosiveness. The athleticism is solid. It's more good than it is outstanding. Maybe not long-term a shortstop, but has infield traits and to go with that left-handed swing and the offensive upside. He fits in this range, and there's some things that fit what Cleveland likes with him. But so we'll see how the board falls on draft night, but going with Emerson today.
He's an Auburn commit, select festival athlete. That's when we all got to know him, and his family as well, ranked 35th overall. Cambridge, Ohio, and he was great at Jupiter. Another time he went down and joined Team Elite, played for that roster, nearly 700 on base. So Colt Emerson. Well, we started to see some high schoolers come off, and Miller and Martin, and then the arms of Meyer and the big arm of White, and then Emerson as well. Hauk joins the mix. High schoolers in this last run of athletes. When we come back, the Atlanta Braves, San Diego Padres, the Yankees, the Phillies, the Astros, the who's who. The joie de vivre amongst baseball are standing by. They get the pick too, and we'll represent them coming up right around the corner. Our mock draft heading into the 2023 MLB Amateur Draft.
With the first pick, he's the number 1 pick in the draft.
Brian and Darren getting right back to it. A dearth of high school players selected in the last wave of picks. The Braves are never shy to select high school players. And so let's get right back to it. At number 24, Brian, please represent the Atlanta Braves.
And we have them with high school players indeed. Here's Sut going with Blake Mitchell, left-handed hitting catcher, high school kid from Texas. It's usually a sign of being really, really good if you're a high school catcher and you go in the first round. Because high school catchers are risky. The catching demographic is super risky just because of what the process of getting to the major leagues as a catcher does to your body. It's hard to project those guys. So when we're talking about projecting on catchers, we're looking for athleticism. We're looking for an ease of movement. You're looking for offensive impact nowadays. You can kind of no longer just be a glove first guy. You have to do something with the stick. And Mitchell's that guy. A really good year for him in Texas this year. He's been a consistent performer throughout his time with Perfect Game. It's like a 70 arm behind the plate with good athleticism, with good ability to receive. A guy that we have no problem saying is going to catch long term and hit from the left side with some impact. And not to mention, he's not a two-way guy when it comes to professional baseball. But if Blake Mitchell had never picked up a bat and had never squatted behind the dish, he would be an incredible pitching prospect too. He's also really, really good on the mound into the mid-90s with a good breaking ball. So we'd be talking about him in that way too. But right now, I'm sticking with the left-handed bat and behind the plate and the first rounder right here for Blake Mitchell.
Sinton High School in Texas as a junior in Texas was the Gatorade Player of the Year. That's how crazy he was last year. His coach is a legend, Adrian Alaniz, and interestingly enough, the man who played at Texas, he went and won a state championship right there at Texas's home beautiful ballpark. So there's a lot of woven tales through the journey of the man who, as you said, can touch 97 miles an hour out of Sinton High School in Texas. So many fun things there for the son of Kevin and Jennifer going to the Atlanta Braves. At number 25, the San Diego Padres.
This is one I think is something that could actually happen as far as a projection. That's not another thing, unique information or anything like that. But we know the San Diego GM has seen Dylan Head play, and that's usually a pretty good indicator of interest. So, and Dylan Head, an explosive athlete from the Chicagoland area. He's a left-handed hitting center fielder. He's committed to Clemson. Was actually originally committed to Michigan, but then followed the Michigan staff and Eric Bakich to Clemson with his commitment. But explosive player. 80 runner down the line. He's got power. He's going to play center field. The power showed up better this spring than we'd seen it before. We'd seen it flash, but it wasn't a huge part of his game. This spring, that's changed a little bit. Hitting for more power now. Like I said, it's the whole package. If you think he can hit, he's going to be an all-star, really. And I think that there's a chance he can hit and hit well with impact. While patrolling center field at a high level, while playing high-level defense and adding that speed and athleticism value as well. A really good pick at this point, and a guy who we've viewed in an extremely positive way for a couple years now.
Class, class, class. As far as the human being, there's no doubt about it. Loves the Chicago White Sox, being from Glenwood, Illinois, and loves that ACES program that gives back to the community, that makes sure that those nearby that ballpark are playing baseball, and those that can afford to play can play, and those that maybe not can play as well. So he's part of that. He loves Alek Thomas. It's no surprise. He's from that same neck of the woods. Alek now in the big leagues, Gold Glove caliber center fielder for the Arizona Diamondbacks. So many fun ties here. What a great and what a fun pick for the San Diego Padres as we now pass the baton to 26, the New York Yankees.
And I think the Yankees could go in any number of directions here. I think Brock Wilken might be in play. I think Bryce Eldridge might be in play, a high school guy. But we're going to stick with Sammy Stafura here, mostly. Well, it makes sense. It's not like we're doing it mostly, but I like a New York team taking a New York high school player. That doesn't always happen, and I think that's cool when it does. So we're going to roll with that. Stafura, another guy who we liked in a big way last year and then kind of went off in Jupiter. That was kind of, for us, his big coming out party, his, hey, look at me, I'm a first rounder next year type of performance. Good body, bigger kid, gorgeous swing from the right side of the plate, has power, has athleticism, developmental road ahead for him, obviously, as there is for any high school player, high school hitter. But really good traits, really good components, and how it all works together there for Stafura. And that's a guy that has had big helium this spring, and for good reason.
What I love about the New York team picking him, he is a passionate New York Mets fan. He loves the New York Mets. I would love more than nothing. You're watching this, Sammy. Sammy's come on our content. He's wonderful. Brandon Nimmo's his favorite player. He's very proud of his Czech heritage, very strong Czech background. When you talk about Sammy Stafura, Yvette and Stefan, our parents, his grandfather, for a long time played professional soccer. So Sammy's a great pick. Sammy, Mets fan, you're going to the Yankees, deal with it because you're going to be a pro. The Philadelphia Phillies, a wonderful team. You're representing kind of a lot of guys on the tech side. One of our leaders in Jim Jenks and the producer of this show, Jason Jaquette. So please pick, do it carefully because they kind of have Philly ties. I don't know what that really means, but please pick very carefully for the Phillies here.
I've heard the Philly ties are something to be worried about. But anyways, as a native Midwesterner, I fear no man. But I'm going with Charlie Soto here for the Phillies. I think it makes sense in terms of upside. I think it makes sense.
Have earned picks. Now, there's some fun things coming up on the backside of this, but pick number 28, because the Mets and the Dodgers, they go over financially. They don't pick technically in the first round. So the Houston Astros, the champs, round it out.
We have them with Brock Wilken here, the big third baseman from Wake Forest. Wake Forest's second first rounder of the draft, inclusive of Rhett Lauder earlier. But Wilken's a guy that we, as a scouting staff, collectively have loved dating back to his amateur days. And I will shout out my boss, Jared Goodwin, in the biggest way here. He has been the biggest fan of Brock Wilken. And Nolan Shanuel, dating back to their high school days. Not to mention the fact that he was the driver of the bus for Ethan Petray last spring, too. And Ethan Petray just had an incredible freshman year at South Carolina. Anyways, enough about Jared. This isn't about him. But Wilken, huge numbers, huge power. We'll see if he's a third baseman long term. He has improved there. There's positive signs to how he's improved defensively at third and maybe a chance to stay there long term. We'll see, but either way, it's massive power from the right side of the plate. He takes his walks. It might not be an overwhelming hit tool at the end of the day, but he should have strong OBP numbers, strong power numbers, and provide some value defensively somewhere. So I think he makes sense here for the Astros. We know that they like power. We know that they value batted ball data. So it fits, and I think that he's deserving of this sort of slotting just based on how good of a player he is.
He's young. His 21st birthday is on June 17th, so he's very, very young to be at this point. 2 years he played in the Cape, had a .402 on base percentage in the Cape.
Yeah.
That's a gauntlet. You're facing a closer that's stretching out essentially starters because they're not going deep. Just a wonderful career, as you said, a great on-base machine. Well done. You've rounded our first round, but because we're in Seattle, there's no way that we just button this up without you repping picks 29 and 30 because of the way things slotted, comp picks that head back their way. And this is why you talked about the Mariners having all this cash, if you will. The Mariners picked 29 and 30. So I'll give you the floor. You can go ahead and talk about both athletes. You can be dramatic and talk about one at a time. But 29 and 30, Seattle is watching very closely.
So there's some elements at play here of you have all this money to play with, and so generally speaking, you're going to take a shot on a guy, pay him a lot, pay him over slot. That's probably what they'd end up doing with Thomas White in this scenario. Then with your other pick, you're probably giving him slot, and then the other pick you have to cut a little bit on. That's generally the formula. It's not a guarantee or anything like that. So I tried to go into these two picks with those in mind. I went with Kevin McGonigal, the left-handed hitting infielder from Pennsylvania. He's a high school kid, as well as Jerron Watts-Brown, the right-handed starter from Oklahoma State. I think they both fit what the Mariners like to do. McGonigal has some comparisons to Cole Young, who they took in the first round last year. I think he's getting dinged because he's probably not a shortstop. He's more of a second baseman, and he's not an overwhelming athlete either. But conversely, viewed as maybe the best high school hit tool, best prep hit tool in the country too. We've seen him show some power from the left side of the plate. Always performed with Canes National. Every time we saw that kid, he was hitting. And then for the second pick, like I said, Watts-Brown from Oklahoma State, a guy who, depending on your organizational philosophy, you either really like him or he's more of a third rounder for you. And I think that for me personally, I love projectable college guys. I love guys with good deliveries. I love guys who throw strikes and have feel to spin the baseball. And even with some up and down results, and even with the velo being up or down depending on the start, I think that Watts-Brown is a guy who fits exactly what Seattle does developmentally with their arms. I think that, you could point to Logan Gilbert or George Kirby of recent drafts, and those guys went higher than this. But either way, he's a guy I think could get into Seattle's system. They can add and sort of keep consistency with the velocity. The slider's already plus. It just makes a lot of sense to me. So for the Seattle fans who will be watching the draft, Thomas White, Kevin McGonigal, Jerron Watts-Brown in front of the home crowd, I think you'd have to be pretty excited about that.
So it's interesting. Best left-handed pitcher. Again, there may be better, but he is skewing as the best left. A man in McGonigal who you guys, I know about Kevin because of you guys. You've called one of the best pure hitters in high school baseball since you could lace him up. So, and then a real upside, a guy who gambled on himself, left Long Beach State, went to a tougher gauntlet. I love it. A few quick notes. McGonigal, as you said, he comps to a similar pick because he's from Pennsylvania, like the man Young who came before him. He is an Auburn commit, McGonigal. So many great numbers. High school baseball, 647 on base, 27 hits, 26 walks. Tracy and Kevin, his parents, McGonigal, a pure bat. And I had a great conversation along with Danny Wexon with Watts-Brown earlier this year. He threw a no-hitter when he was a member of Long Beach State on Mother's Day against UC Riverside with his mom in attendance. That was in his first year, Watts-Brown. And this year, 78 innings, 117 strikeouts. That K-rated comes back again, 33.3, seventh best in the NCAA. Really love Jerron Watts-Brown. All sorts of fun. Thank you for doing that on behalf of the Mariners. We're not going to leave out the Mets and the Dodgers. There's no way that happens. So if you don't mind, if you could represent the Mets at 32, that's when they will step into the room. The Mets, who are so busy with the big boys, they get to come down and pick an amateur player. Who did the Mets pick at 32?
I actually, for the folks watching at home, I didn't know that Sammy Stafura was a Mets fan, and I had Sammy Stafura at this pick in an earlier iteration of the draft when I was working on it. Ended up bumping him up to the Yankees, so that's I apologize, Sammy. I don't even play for the Mets. That's my bad. But either way, here at 32 with the Mets, I have them with Bryce Eldridge, the two-way guy, a high school kid from Virginia. He's huge. He's 6'7", 6'8", whatever it is. He's a left-handed hitter who rakes, and that's unique in and of itself. And there's obvious Spencer Jones comparisons made to last year, but they're different players, they're different athletes, they do different things, whatever. They're both huge and left-handed though, so I kind of get the automatic inclination to comp them. But Eldridge, really good hit tool from the left side. He has monster power. He's performed. We've seen it. Every sort of hurdle we wanted to see him surpass on his developmental path in high school, he cleared. And not to mention the fact that he's also a really good arm. A big right-handed arm on the mound, up to 95, 96 with a good slider, a swing and miss slider. So there's some potential two-way upside there if the Mets wanted to explore it. But Darren, a lot of folks know that I'm mostly a scout with Imperfect Game, but sometimes they see me on TV, sometimes they see me on broadcasts with you. And the same can be said of many of our other scouts, Jeremy Brown, Jared Goodwin, Vinny Servino. We kind of have that little, we do both type of thing. But what most folks haven't seen is Darren Sutton put on a scout hat. Make that transition from broadcaster media to the scout world. So with pick 36, with the Dodgers' first pick, I actually want you to make that pick for us, if you'd be so kind.
Oh man, I'm humbled by this one. I'm really humbled by this one. Hang on one sec. Just off camera, I keep all my fan gear in. Hold on just 1 second. Let's get this.
We didn't plan this at all.
Let's get this. There we go. All right, 36
there it is.
Pick. Kershaw on the back. All right, I'm honored. By the way, folks, if I make the print version, meaning if I make the website with this pick, I'll be humbled and I will be honored. So with the 36th pick, the Dodgers have come into the room. I've seen Josh Burns running around the country. Certainly he's been at High School Showdown and his entire team. They do a wonderful job. This is a personal favorite of mine, and so he's on the list of all the guys I researched. With the 36th overall pick, the Los Angeles Dodgers select Arizona outfielder Chase Davis. Former PG All-American who, simply put, Chase, and we've talked about it, rode the bench his freshman year, didn't play really any meaningful games at all under Jay Johnson, and has gotten better each and every year. Before I maybe extol some more of his virtues, how'd I do with the pick? And scout up Chase, if you don't mind, for us.
I think you nailed it, but I also think you're going to be wrong because I think he's going to go before that eventually, once we get to July. But you definitely nailed it on value. He's a guy who's coming into his own in a big way, especially in recent weeks. A guy who we have a top 40 grade on dating back to April. We're probably going to adjust that upwards as we do the final draft board. But huge left-handed power. The hit tool is coming along. He's probably a corner outfielder long-term, but with that offensive profile, who really cares is kind of where we're at. And he would make a lot of sense for the Dodgers, who do an excellent job of taking the guy that other teams look at as risky and turning him into an all-star. So it makes a lot of sense, and I would love the pick if that would have happened.
Yeah, strikeouts have gone down, right? I mean, that's a big thing certainly for you guys. The strikeout numbers have gone down dramatically. This is something interesting. Carlos Gonzalez, if you followed the game long enough, Cargo, everyone called him. He models his game after him. The swing is very similar if you can go back about a decade to watching Cargo play. Here's the fun part about it that I do know. Cargo and he are communicators regularly. They FaceTime. Cargo heard about it, got in touch with Chase Davis. He's available whenever he needs him. I love that. I love the fact that Cargo's doing it. Thanks for letting me pick. Now I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me three players, and there's a lot of players you guys sent me to research, and now I watched you pick them. There is a bunch that didn't make the mock draft. I'm going to start the clock. I'm going to give you 1 minute. Crystal ball, if you don't mind. 3 players that by the time we get to the draft that weren't on these lists will be drafted in that first round, and quickly tell me
ball 480 feet 2 weeks ago. He looks great, first rounder.
Well done. Just a few seconds over. Brian, thanks, man. Thanks for your insights, and thanks for inviting all of us to come into your scouting meetings when you and your team get together. You guys are tireless. You see players at all ages from 14, 13 on up, and then you see them in college. You have a spare moment. You drive to a college game. That's the kind of work you do. So thank you. That's what separates, I think, us, meaning you guys, from some others, is that you've seen these young men since they kind of went through puberty, then into their dreams of pro baseball. We appreciate your time, man.
Thank you for having me as always. Draft is almost here. I'm excited. I hope everybody else is.
All right, and I can't wait to find out if my pick makes the final rundown. To follow along this draft, the very great stuff that Brian and his team, the stuff that they put out, visit perfectgame.org. Find the newest, the very latest mock draft. On behalf of all of those that get together and scout these players, and those of us that are fortunate enough to create this content, my name's Darren Sutton. He's Brian Sakowski. Enjoy your summer. Enjoy the draft. It's right around the corner. Thanks for spending time with us on Perfect Game TV.